The rain beat softly against the courthouse window, a cruel soundtrack to the moment her world ended. Elena Moore sat at the long oak table, her hands trembling as the divorce papers lay before her like a death certificate. Her husband, Eric Turner, stood across from her, tall, composed, his expensive watch glinting under the pale light. Once he used to hold her hand through every storm. Now he couldn't even look at her. "Just sign it, Elena," he said coldly, his voice void of the tenderness that used to make her heart race. "Let's not drag this out." She swallowed hard, her vision blurred. The pen felt heavier than her heart. She wanted to ask why he had become a stranger, why he had chosen another woman, why the promises they made meant nothing now. But the lump in her throat stole her voice. She could only whisper, 7 years, wasted? Eric's lips curved in a smirk that cut deeper than any blade. "No, just a mistake I'm fixing." The lawyer cleared his throat. The clock ticked. Elena finally pressed the pen to paper, her tears smudging the ink of her name. The sound of her signature echoed louder than thunder. That was the moment her marriage and her illusion died. Outside, she stumbled down the courthouse steps, the city lights blurring into rivers of gold and grief. She pressed a trembling hand against her stomach, unaware of the tiny heartbeat growing inside her. Above the rain, a single thought burned through her tears. He thinks he's done with me. But life isn't done with him. Because 7 years from this night, she would return. No longer broken, no longer begging, with a billionaire by her side and a secret powerful enough to destroy him forever. 7 years earlier, Elena Moore's life looked like a dream pulled straight from a glossy magazine. She was 23, fresh out of architecture school, idealistic and full of hope. Eric Turner was the man every woman in New York whispered about. Ambitious, magnetic, the kind of man who made you believe he could build an empire with his bare hands. When he looked at Elena across the crowded art gallery where they first met, it felt like destiny had taken her hand. Their love moved fast, almost dangerously so. Within 6 months, they were married in a small rooftop ceremony overlooking the city. String lights, soft jazz, champagne bubbles. Everything shimmered with promise. Elena wore a lace gown she designed herself. Eric, beaming with pride, vowed in front of everyone that he would protect her, cherish her, and build their future together. For a time, he meant it. The first years were tender. They lived in a modest Brooklyn apartment, eating instant noodles at midnight while laughing over blueprints sprawled across the table. Eric would kiss the ink smudges from her fingers and whisper that one day she'd design skyscrapers under her own name. They were partners, dreamers, fighters against the world. But success has a way of changing people. When Eric's startup finally caught the attention of a powerful investor, everything began to shift. He started coming home later, smelling of expensive cologne and boardroom pressure. His laughter grew rarer. His phone became his constant companion. Elena tried to understand. She knew ambition required sacrifice. But soon the warmth between them began to cool. Dinner conversations turned into financial briefings. The man who once brought her daisies from the corner market now brought spreadsheets. When she talked about her projects, he interrupted with advice that felt like criticism. Still, she believed in him, in them. She told herself every marriage had seasons, that winter would pass. Then came the whispers. A friend mentioned seeing Eric dining with a woman named Vanessa Chen, daughter of one of his investors. "Probably just business," Elena said quickly, but her heart twisted. She brushed off the unease, convincing herself trust was stronger than jealousy. Yet small cracks spread silently through the foundation of their life. He stopped holding her hand in public. He missed their anniversary, sending flowers with his assistant's handwriting on the card. When she finally asked, "Eric, are we okay?" he gave a half smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Don't be dramatic, Elena. I'm just focused on work." Still, she kept believing. She cooked his favorite meals, stayed up late waiting for him, even skipped a promotion to make more time at home. Love, she thought, required patience. But love also needs respect. And that was the first thing to die. One night, as she waited by the window, she saw him step out of a black car. A woman laughed beside him, her hand on his arm. The streetlight caught the diamond bracelet glinting on the woman's wrist, one Elena had admired months ago in a boutique window. Eric had said they couldn't afford it. Elena's heart sank, yet she didn't cry. Not that night. She only whispered to herself, "Maybe tomorrow he'll remember me." Tomorrow never came, because that was the night Eric Turner stopped being her husband and started becoming her lesson. The first whisper came on a Tuesday. Elena was delivering blueprints to Eric's office, her heart light with the hope that maybe they could have lunch together like they used to. But as she stepped out of the elevator, she heard laughter drifting down the hallway. His laughter, deep and familiar, mixed with a woman's soft giggle. She froze. The glass walls of the conference room didn't hide much. Inside, Eric leaned close to a stunning woman with perfect curls and an effortless smile. Vanessa Chen, the daughter of Eric's new investor, Richard Chen. The same Vanessa whose name had been surfacing in business magazines, her father's fortune opening every door in the city. Elena watched as Vanessa touched Eric's arm lightly, her nails painted crimson. He didn't pull away. Instead, he smiled in that charming way that once belonged only to Elena. The sound of her heart cracking was silent, but she felt it, sharp, precise, final. She turned to leave, clutching the roll of blueprints against her chest. The secretary, who used to greet her warmly, avoided eye contact. As Elena passed, she heard a low murmur from two assistants near the water cooler. "Poor Mrs. Turner," one whispered. "He's definitely trading up." The other chuckled. Well, she never really fit his world, did she? By the time she reached the street, her vision blurred. The city's noise swallowed her quiet heartbreak. Horns, footsteps, sirens, all blending into one cruel symphony. She wanted to scream, but instead she kept walking, the blueprints clutched so tightly her knuckles turned white. That evening she cooked dinner for two, like always. She set the table, lit the candles, and waited. Eric came home after midnight, smelling faintly of expensive perfume that wasn't hers. When she asked where he'd been, he said, "Working." When she pressed, he sighed, annoyed. "Elena, you're imagining things. Vanessa's an investor's daughter. I can't ignore her." "I'm not asking you to ignore her," Elena said quietly. "I'm asking you to remember me." He didn't answer. He just loosened his tie, poured himself a drink, and turned on the news. That silence hurt more than any argument ever could. Days turned into weeks, and the whispers grew louder. People she once considered friends now spoke to her with pity, their smiles tight and rehearsed. At a charity gala, she overheard someone say, "He'll propose to Vanessa soon. Her family could triple his company's value." Elena stood there, holding a glass of champagne that suddenly tasted like ashes. That night, she confronted him. "Eric, is there someone else?" she asked, her voice shaking but steady. He looked at her for a long moment, then laughed softly. "Someone else? Elena, you need to stop acting so insecure. This is why people don't take you seriously. You're too emotional." Too emotional. The words echoed through her mind, scraping against every tender part of her heart. Once, he had called her passion beautiful. Now, it was a flaw. She went to bed alone, the sound of his laughter from the living room slicing through the dark. That was the night she realized she wasn't losing him. She had already lost him, and yet, she couldn't walk away. Not yet. Because love, even when it's dying, doesn't disappear quietly. It leaves echoes, memories, and a faint, desperate hope that maybe, just maybe, he'll turn back. But soon, Elena would learn that sometimes the only way to be heard is to let silence speak for you. It was a Friday night, one of those early spring evenings when the air smelled like rain and the world seemed to hold its breath before a storm. Elena waited at home, dinner set perfectly on the table. Roasted chicken, his favorite, and the bottle of Merlot they'd saved for a special occasion. She didn't know it yet, but this was the last dinner she would ever cook for her husband. Hours passed. The candles burned down to puddles of wax. Her phone stayed silent. When she finally heard the key turn in the door, relief washed over her, until she saw his face. Eric looked distant, almost irritated that she was still awake. "You're late," she said softly. "I told you I had a meeting," he replied, tossing his jacket on the couch. His tie was loose and his shirt smelled faintly of perfume. Vanessa's, Elena realized. That same sharp floral scent had clung to his suits for weeks. "I made dinner," she said, forcing a smile. "Your favorite." He glanced at the table, then shrugged. "I already ate." Something inside her snapped. With who, Eric? With her? He froze for a moment, then sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose like she was a child asking too many questions. "Elena, please, don't start this tonight." "Start what?" she asked, her voice trembling. Asking why my husband is spending every night with another woman? He met her eyes then, and for the first time she saw nothing in them. No love, no guilt, just cold practicality. You're making this harder than it needs to be. Vanessa and I, we understand each other. Her family can take my company to the next level. You wouldn't get that. Elena felt the world tilt. You're leaving me? For a business deal? His silence was answer enough. She stumbled backward, gripping the edge of the table. I gave up everything for us. I turned down my promotion, I followed your dreams, I believed in you. And I'm grateful, he interrupted sharply. But things change, people change. He straightened his tie. I'll make sure you're taken care of. There's no reason to make this ugly. Ugly. The words stung like a slap. She wanted to scream, to beg, to throw every broken dream in his face. But all she could manage was a whisper. Was I ever enough for you? He didn't answer. He just picked up his phone, scrolling as if their marriage was an inconvenience on his to-do list. That was the moment something inside her died. Not the love. Love doesn't die that easily, but the illusion. The belief that he was the man she once knew. When he left that night, the door slammed with a finality that echoed through every room. She stood in the silence, surrounded by the scent of cold food and burnt candles, her hands trembling over the empty plates. Outside, thunder cracked. Rain began to fall in furious sheets against the windows, washing away the last traces of their life together. Elena sank to the floor, clutching her chest, sobbing so hard she could barely breathe. But somewhere deep inside, beneath the heartbreak, a single spark began to form. A quiet, dangerous promise. He had broken her. But one day, he would look at her again and realize he'd destroyed the best thing he ever had. A month after Eric walked out, the apartment felt like a mausoleum of broken promises. His suits were gone from the closet, his cologne no longer lingered in the air, but his absence was louder than his presence had ever been. Elena moved through the rooms like a ghost, folding the dinner napkins they'd never used, washing dishes for a man who wasn't coming home. She told herself that time would dull the ache. It didn't. Then, one morning, the nausea came, sharp, relentless, undeniable. She blamed stress at first. Sleepless nights, skipped meals, too much coffee, but deep down, a truth she wasn't ready to face began to stir. At the drugstore, she stood frozen in the aisle, staring at the pregnancy tests lined up like tiny judges. Her hands trembled as she bought one, then another, then 3. Back home, the seconds stretched into eternity as she waited for the result. When the second pink line appeared, the room seemed to spin. She sat on the edge of the tub, clutching the test in disbelief. Tears streamed down her face, not of joy, not yet, but of fear. The man who had promised her forever had left her with a baby she hadn't planned for, and a future she couldn't imagine. She wanted to call him. For one fleeting moment she imagined his voice softening, his guilt surfacing, his arms pulling her close again. But then she remembered his words. Vanessa and I understand each other. The fantasy crumbled. For the next few days, Elena lived in a fog. She forced herself to eat, to sleep, to breathe, but every night she pressed a hand to her stomach, whispering to the life growing inside her, "It's okay. I'll protect you. I'll protect us." One afternoon, she gathered the courage to see him. He was at a press event for his company's new partnership with the Chen Group. Cameras flashed, microphones swarmed, and there he was, smiling, radiant, his hand intertwined with Vanessa's. Her engagement ring caught the light like a blade. The sight gutted Elena. She stood at the edge of the crowd, unnoticed, her world collapsing all over again. That was the moment she knew there was no place left for her in his life. The man on that stage wasn't the one she married. He was a stranger, wrapped in ambition. She turned away before the first tear fell. As she crossed the street, a wave of dizziness hit her. The world blurred. The last thing she remembered was the sound of tires screeching and a stranger shouting her name before everything went black. When she woke, she was in a hospital bed, the sterile scent of antiseptic filling her lungs. A doctor stood beside her, voice calm but serious. "You fainted from exhaustion, Mrs. Turner, and stress, but the baby's heartbeat is strong. You need rest." Mrs. Turner? The name felt foreign now, belonging to a life that had already died. That night, alone in the hospital room, Elena looked out the window at the rain-slicked streets below. She whispered to herself, "You may have taken my heart, Eric, but you'll never take my strength." As she closed her eyes, the monitor beside her beeped softly, a steady rhythm, tiny but fierce. It was the sound of a heartbeat refusing to give up, and that heartbeat would soon become her reason to rise again. 3 days after she was discharged, Elena packed a single suitcase. The walls of the apartment seemed to close in around her. The framed photos, the scent of old perfume, the echo of arguments that still hung in the air. Everything reminded her of what she'd lost, of what had been stolen from her. She couldn't stay there, not in the city where every street whispered his name. The rain hadn't stopped since that night. She stood by the window, one hand on her small bump, the other clutching a train ticket to Chicago. It wasn't a plan, just an escape. No one knew where she was going, and that was exactly how she wanted it. The city lights blurred through the downpour, and with one deep breath, she turned away from the life she once built. The train station was nearly empty. Elena moved slowly, exhaustion weighing her down. She didn't notice the man in the dark overcoat watching her from the corner. Not with suspicion, but concern. When she collapsed near the platform, clutching her stomach in pain, he was the one who rushed forward. Miss, can you hear me?" His voice was steady, commanding. Before she could answer, everything went dark. When she awoke again, the beeping of medical monitors surrounded her. The smell of antiseptic stung her nose. A nurse stood beside her bed, smiling gently. "You're safe now, sweetheart. The baby's fine. You've been through a lot." Elena blinked, confused. "Where am I?" "You're in a private clinic outside the city," said a man's voice. It was him, the man from the station. He stood at the foot of her bed, tall, composed, his gray eyes filled with calm intelligence. "My name is Adrian Blake. I found you at the train platform. You were in trouble." "Why would you help me?" she asked weakly. He hesitated, his jaw tightening before he spoke. "Let's just say, I owed your father once. He saved my life a long time ago." The words barely registered. Her father had died when she was 16, a quiet man who had always avoided questions about his business. She never knew he had connections to men like Adrian, men whose names appeared in financial magazines, whispered among billionaires. Over the next few days, Adrian stayed by her side. He didn't ask for details. He didn't pry. He simply made arrangements. A safe house, medical care, and a new identity if she wanted one. For the first time in months, Elena felt something she hadn't felt in a long time: safety. When she told him she was pregnant, his expression softened. "Then you have more reason than ever to start over," he said. "Forget the past, you deserve peace." Elena wanted to believe him, but peace felt like a distant country she didn't know the language of. Still she nodded. "Where would I even go?" "Anywhere," Adrian replied. "Switzerland, maybe. I have properties there, quiet, safe, private." And so, a week later, under a gray dawn sky, Elena Moore ceased to exist. The woman who boarded the plane to Zurich carried no wedding ring, no photos, no trace of the life she'd left behind. As the plane ascended through the clouds, she placed a hand over her stomach. "It's just us now," she whispered, "and we'll never look back." Below, New York faded into a patchwork of gray and gold, disappearing beneath the clouds, just like the woman who once called it home. Because from that moment on, the world would believe she was gone. But in truth, she was only beginning to rise. The snow fell softly outside the window of the Swiss chalet, blanketing the world in silence. For the first time in months, Elena woke to peace instead of panic. The air smelled of pine and cold mountain air, not exhaust or regret. It was quiet, too quiet, but she was learning to live with that. She wrapped her hands around a cup of tea, feeling the warmth seep into her fingers. Inside her belly, life moved gently, a reminder that she wasn't truly alone. Adrian Blake had kept his promise. The man was as mysterious as he was generous, rarely speaking of his own life, but always ensuring hers was stable. He had given her a small cottage near Lake Lucerne, a modest home compared to his world of private jets and penthouses, but it was perfect. For Elena, it was sanctuary. She started working for him remotely, sketching designs for his company, Blake Developments, under a pseudonym. Architecture had always been her language, her refuge. Drawing again brought her back to life, one pencil stroke at a time. At night, she would sit by the fire and think of Eric. She wondered if he ever looked for her, or if he had simply moved on, married Vanessa, hosted lavish parties, smiled for cameras while pretending she had never existed. It didn't hurt the same way anymore. The ache was still there, but quieter, dulled by time and distance. When her son was born that spring, she named him Liam, a name that meant strong-willed protector. Holding him for the first time, she felt something shift deep inside her. This tiny heartbeat, once her only reason to survive, had now become her reason to live. His eyes, wide and bright, reminded her too much of Eric's, but she promised herself that her son would never inherit his father's arrogance. Years passed like the turning of seasons. Elena worked hard, balancing motherhood and her growing responsibilities within Adrian's company. He often visited the chalet, bringing her books, files, or simply conversation. His presence was calm, respectful, never intrusive. She soon realized that behind his stoic demeanor was a man who had also known loss. One evening, as they watched Liam chase snowflakes outside, Adrian said quietly, "He has your strength." Elena smiled faintly. "Maybe, or maybe he has yours. You saved us, Adrian." He looked away, his jaw tightening. "No, I just kept a promise to a man who once saved me." "Who was he?" she asked. "Your father," he replied after a pause. "James Moore. He was one of the few men I ever trusted, and he asked me years ago to watch over you if anything ever happened to him." The revelation stunned her. She had never known her father's reach stretch so far. She had thought she was just the daughter of an ordinary businessman, but clearly there was more to the Moore name than she'd been told. That night, as Liam slept, Adrian left her with a folder. Inside were documents, proof of her inheritance, accounts, shares, and property deeds she hadn't known existed. "You're not just surviving anymore," his note read. "You're an heir, Elena. It's time to remember who you are." She sat in silence for a long time, staring at the papers that could change her life again. For 7 years, she had hidden from the world. But now, the world, her world, was calling her back. And this time, when she returned, she wouldn't come as the woman who was left behind. She would come back as the woman no one saw coming. 7 winters passed in Switzerland, each one carving a little more strength into Elena's spirit. The quiet life she had built was no longer a hiding place. It was a forge. Each sunrise over the Alps taught her something Eric Turner never could, that true power is born in silence, not noise. Under Adrian Blake's mentorship, Elena learned how the world of business truly worked. The deals whispered behind closed doors, the ruthless decisions disguised as strategy, the art of smiling while you're bleeding inside. At first, she felt out of place in that world of billionaires and boardrooms. But Adrian saw something in her, a precision, a quiet intelligence that couldn't be taught. "You don't need to shout to be powerful," he told her one evening during a meeting in Zurich. "You just need to know when to listen and when to strike." Elena listened. She learned. And she struck. Within 2 years, she became the creative director of Blake Developments, designing eco-friendly corporate towers that made headlines across Europe. Her name, well, her alias, appeared in architectural journals. She was respected, even envied. But no one knew the truth, that behind the calm smile of E.M. Moore, there was a woman who had once been broken by love and rebuilt by loss. Adrian watched her transformation with quiet pride. Yet beneath his admiration, there was something unspoken. His eyes lingered a little too long when she entered a room. His voice softened when he spoke her name. But Elena never let herself cross that line. Her heart, though healed, was scarred, and some scars never fade. "I can't love again," she confessed one night as they walked along the frozen lake, the air sharp and clean. "Not after what happened. Love made me weak." "No," Adrian said gently. "Love made you human. Pain made you strong." The words struck her deeper than she wanted to admit. She looked out at the vast white horizon and whispered, "Then I'm strong enough now." But strength, she soon learned, was not just about surviving. It was about facing what once destroyed you. One morning, Adrian placed a file on her desk. "There's a project I want you to lead," he said. "It's in New York, a massive redevelopment, prime real estate, global investors." The name on the file stopped her breath, Turner Global Developments. For a long moment, the room was silent except for the faint ticking of the clock. Her pulse roared in her ears. "You knew," she said quietly. "I did," Adrian admitted, "and I think you're ready." She looked down at the blueprints. The same city that once buried her was now calling her back. The irony was cruel. but so was destiny. That night, after Liam had fallen asleep, she stood by the window of their villa. Snowflakes brushed the glass like whispers of the past. She thought of Eric, the betrayal, the lies, the woman he'd chosen over her. Did he still think of her? Did he ever regret it? She touched her reflection in the glass. "You wanted power, Eric," she murmured. "Now you'll see what real power looks like." For 7 years, Elena had been the woman in the shadows, the ghost he left behind. But soon, she would walk back into his world. Not as his wife, not as his victim, but as his rival. And when that day came, she wouldn't need revenge, because success would speak louder than vengeance ever could. 7 winters passed in Switzerland, each one carving a little more strength into Elena's spirit. The quiet life she had built was no longer a hiding place, it was a forge. Each sunrise over the Alps taught her something Eric Turner never could. That true power is born in silence, not noise. Under Adrian Blake's mentorship, Elena learned how the world of business truly worked. The deals whispered behind closed doors, the ruthless decisions disguised as strategy, the art of smiling while you're bleeding inside. At first, she felt out of place in that world of billionaires and boardrooms. But Adrian saw something in her, a precision, a quiet intelligence that couldn't be taught. "You don't need to shout to be powerful," he told her one evening during a meeting in Zurich. "You just need to know when to listen and when to strike." Elena listened, she learned, and she struck. Within 2 years, she became the creative director of Blake Developments, designing eco-friendly corporate towers that made headlines across Europe. Her name, well, her alias, appeared in architectural journals. She was respected, even envied. But no one knew the truth, that behind the calm smile of E.M. Moore, there was a woman who had once been broken by love and rebuilt by loss. Adrian watched her transformation with quiet pride. Yet, beneath his admiration, there was something unspoken. His eyes lingered a little too long when she entered a room, his voice softened when he spoke her name. But Elena never let herself cross that line. Her heart, though healed, was scarred, and some scars never fade. "I can't love again," she confessed one night as they walked along the frozen lake, the air sharp and clean. "Not after what happened. Love made me weak." "No," Adrian said gently. "Love made you human. Pain made you strong." The words struck her deeper than she wanted to admit. She looked out at the vast white horizon and whispered, "Then I'm strong enough now." But strength, she soon learned, was not just about surviving. It was about facing what once destroyed you. One morning, Adrian placed a file on her desk. "There's a project I want you to lead," he said. "It's in New York. A massive redevelopment, prime real estate, global investors." The name on the file stopped her breath. Turner Global Developments. For a long moment, the room was silent except for the faint ticking of the clock. Her pulse roared in her ears. "You knew," she said quietly. "I did," Adrian admitted. "And I think you're ready." She looked down at the blueprints. The same city that once buried her was now calling her back. The irony was cruel, but so was destiny. That night, after Liam had fallen asleep, she stood by the window of their villa. Snowflakes brushed the glass like whispers of the past. She thought of Eric, the betrayal, the lies, the woman he'd chosen over her. Did he still think of her? Did he ever regret it? She touched her reflection in the glass. "You wanted power, Eric," she murmured. "Now you'll see what real power looks like." For 7 years, Elena had been the woman in the shadows, the ghost he left behind. But soon she would walk back into his world, not as his wife, not as his victim, but as his rival. And when that day came, she wouldn't need revenge. Because success would speak louder than vengeance ever could. The news broke on a crisp autumn morning. Financial Times ran the headline, "Blake Developments partners with Turner Global for Manhattan Skyline Project." The announcement sent shockwaves through Wall Street. The collaboration between the two titans promised to reshape New York's skyline and rewrite the hierarchy of power in the city. But what no one knew, not even the most curious journalist, was that the project's lead architect was none other than Elena Moore. Not the timid wife Eric Turner once dismissed, but a reimagined woman, poised, sharp, untouchable. When Adrian handed her the official documents, his tone was calm, but his eyes searched hers. "This deal will put you in the same room as him," he said softly. "Are you ready for that?" Elena didn't hesitate. "I've been ready for 7 years." She spent the following weeks preparing for her return, both professionally and emotionally. She studied every detail of Turner Global's operations, memorized the weaknesses in Eric's proposals, and refined her designs until they radiated brilliance. Still, late at night, when Liam was asleep, she caught herself wondering, what would she feel when she saw him again? Anger? Pity? Nothing at all? The day before their first joint board meeting, Adrian hosted a private dinner at the Blake Tower, overlooking Zurich's shimmering skyline. The investors toasted to the upcoming partnership, unaware of the storm it would bring. Adrian leaned toward her as the others talked. "When you walk into that room tomorrow, don't think about him," he said. "Think about every door that slammed in your face, and then walk through this one like you own the building." Elena smiled faintly. "I plan to." The next morning, the private jet sliced through clouds toward New York, a city she'd sworn she'd never see again. As the skyline appeared in the distance, a strange calm settled over her. The wounds had healed, but the scars remained, like invisible armor. Her arrival at the Turner Global headquarters caused a ripple of curiosity. Cameras flashed, reporters whispered, and executives tried to guess who the elegant woman beside Adrian Blake was. Dressed in a tailored ivory suit and heels that clicked like punctuation, Elena exuded quiet authority. Every head turned as she entered the glass conference room. Eric was already there. For a moment, the world seemed to stop. He looked up from his notes, his confident smile fading as his eyes locked on hers. Recognition struck like lightning. He stood abruptly, almost spilling his coffee. "Elena?" She didn't flinch. Her voice was calm, professional. "Mr. Turner." The way she said his name, distant, detached, sent a chill through him. Everyone in the room exchanged glances, sensing the tension but not understanding its depth. Adrian broke the silence. "Shall we begin?" Throughout the meeting, Elena presented her architectural plans with precision and grace. Her voice never wavered. Eric tried to focus, but he couldn't. The woman before him was nothing like the wife he had left behind. Gone was the softness, the hesitation. In her place stood a woman who commanded respect without demanding it. When the meeting ended, Eric lingered as the others left. "You're working with Blake?" he asked, disbelief edging his tone. Elena gathered her papers. "I'm leading the project." His jaw tightened. "You could have told me you were back." She looked at him then, her expression unreadable. "You could have cared that I left." Before he could respond, she walked out, her heels echoing through the marble hall like a verdict. For the first time in years, Eric Turner, the man who thought he'd conquered the world, felt small. And for the first time, Elena Moore knew what real power felt like. The elevator ride to the top floor of Turner Global felt longer than any flight Elena had ever taken. Her reflection in the mirrored walls stared back at her, a woman sculpted by time, pain, and quiet determination. Her black silk blouse and tailored white blazer projected authority, but beneath the calm exterior, her heart pounded in steady, deliberate defiance. When the elevator doors opened, the air shifted. The boardroom was sleek and sterile, floor-to-ceiling glass walls, a skyline view that screamed power. Eric Turner stood at the head of the long mahogany table, surrounded by his executives. The man she once called her husband looked every bit the empire builder. Immaculately dressed, confident, smiling that same calculated smile he once used to charm her. But when their eyes met, his expression faltered. For a split second, he wasn't the CEO, the mogul, the public figure. He was just Eric, the man who had once begged her to believe in him. "Elena," he said softly, his voice catching somewhere between surprise and disbelief. "Mr. Turner," she replied evenly, setting her portfolio on the table. "Shall we begin?" Every head in the room turned toward them. No one else understood the undercurrent of tension slicing through the air, but they felt it. Eric forced a smirk, masking the flicker of unease in his eyes. "I didn't realize Blake Developments had such talented leadership these days." "Apparently," she said, glancing briefly at Adrian seated beside her, "you haven't been keeping up." Adrian's tone was cool but cutting. "Miss Moore has led 3 award-winning projects across Europe. She'll be overseeing the entire Manhattan Skyline Initiative." Eric's jaw tightened. "Impressive," he said, the word sounding more like an accusation than praise. The meeting began, but for Eric, the world blurred into background noise. Elena spoke with confidence, her voice steady as she laid out design plans and projections. Every detail, every slide reflected brilliance. She wasn't just competent, she was extraordinary. And that realization hit him like a knife. This wasn't the woman who used to wait up for him, worried and lonely. This wasn't the wife he left behind with empty promises and tears. This was someone entirely new, someone who didn't need him, didn't want his validation. Halfway through the presentation, Vanessa entered. She wore her usual armor of designer silk and smugness, her diamond ring glinting as she adjusted her sunglasses. She whispered something into Eric's ear and cast a disdainful glance at Elena. Adrian leaned slightly toward Elena, his voice low. "Ignore her. Flies don't bother lions." Elena hid a small smile, continuing as though nothing happened. Vanessa, realizing her presence meant nothing, frowned. The power dynamic had shifted, and she knew it. When the meeting ended, applause filled the room. Investors were thrilled, reporters outside clamored for statements. Elena excused herself to the balcony overlooking the city. For the first time, she breathed in the scent of New York again. Steel, ambition, memory. Behind her, the door opened. "You look different," Eric said, stepping outside. She turned slowly, her gaze level. "No, Eric, I just finally look like myself." He swallowed hard, searching for the right words. "I never stopped thinking about you." She tilted her head slightly, her tone razor sharp. "Then you must have been miserable thinking about the woman you destroyed." He flinched, but she didn't wait for an answer. She picked up her briefcase and walked back inside, leaving him alone with his reflection in the glass, haunted by a woman he could no longer control. As the elevator doors closed behind her, Elena exhaled, steady and unshaken. For the first time in 7 years, she wasn't the one left standing in the ruins. He was. The morning after the meeting, the tabloids were on fire. "Mystery woman beside billionaire Adrian Blake, ex-wife of Eric Turner," screamed one headline. Another read, "Elena Moore's triumphant return, from divorce to power player." Overnight, her name, once whispered in pity, became the spark lighting up New York's social media feeds. Elena watched the chaos unfold on her tablet as she sipped her coffee at the Peninsula Hotel. She didn't flinch at the photos, the ones showing her stepping out of the black car beside Adrian, the flash of her smile, the poised tilt of her chin. The world had rewritten her story, and for once, she didn't mind. Let them talk. She had lived in silence long enough. Adrian entered the suite, carrying 2 files. "You've seen the headlines," he said, a hint of amusement in his voice. "I have," she replied calmly, scrolling past another story speculating that she and Adrian were engaged. "They're calling me the woman who rose from ashes." "A bit dramatic, don't you think?" Adrian smirked. "The media loves a resurrection. You're the perfect story. Betrayal, disappearance, and now power. They'll eat it up." "What about Eric?" she asked quietly. "His PR team is scrambling," Adrian said, setting the files down. "Apparently, his wife isn't taking the attention well." Elena looked up, her eyes unreadable. Vanessa never did like sharing the spotlight. That afternoon, she arrived at Turner Global for a design review meeting. Whispers followed her through the hallway. Executives who once ignored her now straightened their ties when she walked past. Power, she realized, didn't need to be demanded. It simply needed to be earned and remembered. Inside the conference room, Eric was waiting. He looked tired, his usual composure fraying. "You're enjoying this, aren't you?" he said the moment they were alone. "What exactly am I enjoying?" she asked, arching an eyebrow. "This," he gestured toward the window, where reporters lingered outside. "The circus, the attention. You love seeing me humiliated." Elena smiled faintly. "I don't need to humiliate you, Eric. You're doing that all by yourself." He clenched his jaw, then softened. "Elena, you're better than this. We don't have to be enemies." "Enemies?" she repeated, almost laughing. "You made that choice years ago, when you left me standing in the rain with nothing but a broken promise." He took a step closer, lowering his voice. "Do you really think Blake cares about you? He's using you, Elena, just like he uses everyone." "Funny," she said evenly. "That's exactly what people used to say about you." The door opened, breaking the tension. Vanessa swept in, perfume thick in the air, smile razor sharp. "Darling," she said to Eric, ignoring Elena completely, "the investors are waiting." Then, turning to Elena, she added with saccharine sweetness, "You look different. I almost didn't recognize you without tears." Elena didn't blink. "That's because I stopped crying when I stopped caring." The silence that followed was electric. Even Vanessa's smirk faltered. As Alina left the room, her phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. "He's not the only one watching you. Be careful." Her stomach tightened. For the first time, she felt something she hadn't in years: unease. Adrian's warning echoed in her mind. The higher you rise, the more visible you become. She turned toward the window, watching the city pulse below. The past was behind her, but its shadows were still moving. Because in New York, nothing stays buried forever, especially secrets. The first time Eric saw the boy, he froze. It was a sunny Saturday afternoon, and the lobby of the Blake Development headquarters was buzzing with energy. Elena was there for a design presentation, graceful and collected as always. But beside her, holding her hand, was a little boy, 6 years old, dark hair, bright blue eyes, and a smile that stopped Eric cold. He looked exactly like him. The child tugged on Elena's sleeve. "Mom, can I go look at the fountain?" His voice was soft but confident, the way Eric's used to sound when he was young. "Stay where I can see you, sweetheart," Elena said, smiling warmly. Eric stood near the elevator, hidden by a marble pillar, watching. His mind raced. "Mom?" The word hit him like a blow. Elena had a son, but whose? The elevator doors opened and Vanessa stepped out, irritation painted across her face. "Eric, are you coming?" she snapped. Then she noticed where he was looking. Her eyes narrowed. "Who's the kid?" I don't know," he muttered, unable to look away. Vanessa followed his gaze and frowned. "Wait, that's her." Elena turned just then, her eyes meeting Eric's across the lobby. For a moment, time stopped. There was no noise, no people, just that electric, wordless collision of past and present. Then, calmly, she reached for the boy's hand and walked away. Later that night, Eric sat in his office, the city lights flickering outside. He poured himself a drink, his hands shaking slightly. Could it be? The dates lined up. 7 years ago, the divorce, the silence, her disappearance. He clenched his jaw. No, she would have told me. Wouldn't she? Vanessa appeared in the doorway, arms crossed. "You've been staring at that window for an hour," she said coldly. "Don't tell me you're still hung up on your ex." Eric ignored her, scrolling through old photos of him and Elena. The memories stung. The laughter, the promises, the way she used to look at him like he was the only man in the world. "She has a kid," he said quietly. "So?" Vanessa shrugged. "Good for her." He turned to her, his voice low. "He looks like me." Vanessa's smirk vanished. "You think she had your child and didn't tell you? Don't be ridiculous, Eric. She's manipulating you." But the seed of doubt was already rooted too deep. The next day, he made a call to a private investigator. "Find out everything about Elena Moore," he ordered. "Where she's been, who she's been with, and who that boy is." Days passed, but sleep never came easy. At the office, he couldn't focus. Every meeting blurred into background noise. All he saw were those blue eyes, the same shade he saw in the mirror every morning. Finally, the report arrived in a discreet envelope. Eric opened it with trembling hands. The first page was a photo, Elena and Liam, walking along Lake Lucerne, laughing. The caption beneath it read, "Elena Moore Blake, resident of Switzerland, mother to Liam Moore, age 6. Blake, his blood ran cold. Adrian Blake, the billionaire, the man she worked for. His stomach twisted. "No," he whispered, "she wouldn't." At the bottom of the report was a sealed envelope marked "Confidential, Paternity Test Requested." His hands shook as he tore it open. The results were clear. Probability of paternity, 99.8%. The glass of scotch slipped from his hand, shattering on the floor. For the first time in years, Eric Turner couldn't breathe. Because the boy he had just seen wasn't just her son. He was his. The annual Manhattan Skyline Charity Gala was the event of the season. Gold chandeliers, champagne towers, and reporters hungry for scandal. It was also the night Elena Moore chose to step fully into the spotlight. For weeks, rumors had swirled about her partnership with Adrian Blake, about the mysterious boy who accompanied her, about Eric Turner's sudden silence. Tonight, the truth would find its stage. She arrived in a floor-length black gown that shimmered under the soft light, every movement a declaration of quiet power. The photographers turned instantly, their flashes painting her in brilliance. Beside her, Adrian, elegant as ever in a tailored tuxedo, offered his arm. To the crowd, they looked like royalty, untouchable, magnetic. Across the ballroom, Eric watched them enter. His pulse quickened. The paternity results still burned in his pocket like a secret too heavy to carry. He hadn't confronted her yet. He didn't know how. But now, seeing her glide through the room with Adrian's hand resting protectively at her back, jealousy curdled into something darker, regret. Vanessa clung to his arm, her smile brittle. "She's enjoying this," she hissed under her breath, "parading around like she owns the place." "She does," Eric said quietly. Before Vanessa could respond, the host took the stage. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our newest partners in the Manhattan Skyline project, Mr. Adrian Blake and Miss Alina Moore, CEO of Moore Global Architecture." Gasps rippled through the crowd. CEO. The title hung in the air like a spark. Cameras flashed wildly as Alina stepped up to the microphone, her voice calm and melodic. "This project isn't just about buildings," she said. "It's about second chances. It's about rebuilding what was broken and proving that strength doesn't always roar. It rises." Her words landed like thunder. Eric gripped his glass, jaw clenched. He'd underestimated her. Again, she hadn't just rebuilt her life. She'd built an empire. When she stepped down from the stage, Vanessa blocked her path, a smile sharp enough to cut glass. "Touching speech," she said sweetly. "Almost made me forget you built your success on someone else's money." Elena met her gaze without blinking. "Oh, I didn't build it on someone else's money," she said softly. "I built it on someone else's mistakes." For the first time, Vanessa faltered. The surrounding crowd murmured, sensing the tension. Adrian appeared at Alina's side, his presence quiet but commanding. "Is there a problem here?" he asked. "Not anymore," Alina replied, eyes never leaving Vanessa's. The band started playing again, drowning out the whispers, but the moment had already gone viral. By midnight, social media was ablaze with clips of the exchange. Headlines reading, "Alina Moore destroys rival at gala," and the ex-wife who came back stronger. Later, out on the terrace overlooking the city, Eric found her alone. The night breeze lifted a strand of her hair as she looked out at the skyline she once dreamed of designing. "You've changed," he said quietly. She turned to him, eyes cool and steady. "No, Eric, you just never looked closely enough to see who I really was." He hesitated, then pulled a folded document from his jacket. "I know about Liam." Her breath caught, but she didn't look away. "Then you know he's the only thing I did right." "I want to see him," he said, voice cracking. Elena studied him for a long moment, then nodded once. "You will, but not as his father, as a stranger earning his forgiveness." Eric's throat tightened. "Elena, please." She stepped back, her voice calm but final. "You lost the right to please 7 years ago." Then she turned and walked back inside, the sound of her heels fading like the closing of a chapter. And for Eric Turner, it truly was the end of one life, and the beginning of his reckoning. By Monday morning, the whispers had turned into headlines. Turner heir discovered, secret child of the Skyline project. The entire city buzzed with speculation. Photos of Alina, Adrian, and Liam leaving the gala together were plastered across every media outlet. The resemblance between Liam and Eric was undeniable. Same eyes, same tilt of the chin, and the gossip world devoured it. Inside Turner Global's glass tower, chaos reigned. Eric's PR team huddled in emergency meetings, Vanessa stormed through hallways, and investors demanded explanations. Eric stood in his office, staring out over Manhattan, the city he once ruled, now slipping from his grasp. He had spent the weekend in torment, reading and rereading the paternity results. The truth had detonated inside him, leaving only guilt and panic in its wake. He thought he could hide it, manage it quietly, but now it was out, and there was no controlling the storm. Downstairs, reporters camped outside the building. Someone had leaked the DNA report. When Vanessa burst into his office, her heels clicking like gunfire, she was shaking with rage. "You let this happen. The entire world thinks she's the victim, and you." "I'm not talking about this here," Eric snapped. "Oh, we're talking about it everywhere," she shot back. "The board wants answers. The investors are threatening to pull out. And your ex-wife? She's being hailed as the face of female empowerment." Eric rubbed his temples. "Vanessa, just stop." "No," she hissed, eyes blazing. "You destroyed our image for her. You humiliated me." Before he could respond, she threw a glossy magazine onto his desk. On the cover, Alina, poised and radiant with Liam beside her. The headline read, "Alina Moore Blake, architect, mother, visionary." Vanessa's voice cracked. "You still love her, don't you?" Eric didn't answer. He didn't have to. The silence was enough. That afternoon, he received a call from Adrian Blake himself. "We need to meet," Adrian said curtly. Today. When Eric arrived at the Blake Tower, security escorted him to a private office overlooking the city. Adrian stood by the window, calm and composed. "You've caused a mess, Turner," he said without preamble. "My company, my partner, and her son are being dragged through the mud because of you." "I didn't leak it," Eric said sharply. Adrian turned, his gaze cold. "Maybe not. But you created the story, you abandoned it, and now you'll live with it." "I have a right to see my son," Eric said, voice breaking. Adrian's expression hardened. "You had that right 7 years ago, when you left his mother standing in the rain." Eric clenched his fists. "She kept him from me." "She protected him from you," Adrian countered. "From the man you were." The words hit harder than any punch. Eric staggered back, guilt twisting through his chest. Meanwhile, across the city, Elena sat in her office as her assistant brought in a stack of tabloids. She didn't open them. She didn't need to. Her phone buzzed with messages. Journalists, lawyers, sponsors. But one text made her heart stop. It was from an unknown number. "I know you didn't leak it, but I did. The world needed to see who really won. Vanessa." Elena's hands trembled as she set the phone down. She stared out the window, the skyline glittering like shards of glass. It wasn't anger she felt, it was clarity. That night she released a public statement, calm, direct, graceful. She confirmed the truth. Liam was Eric Turner's son, but she also added one line that silenced the tabloids and made headlines worldwide. "Some men build empires, others destroy them. But mothers, we rebuild them, brick by brick, child by child, truth by truth." The world applauded her strength. Turner Global's stock plummeted, and for the first time, Eric Turner realized what it meant to lose everything, including the family he'd never valued until it was gone. The world had crowned Elena Moore a phoenix, but fame never came without fire. Her public statement had made her a symbol of strength, admired by millions, hated by a few, feared by those who once looked down on her. Yet as the city obsessed over her newfound power, one question burned quietly beneath the surface. Who exactly was Adrian Blake, and why had he risked his empire for her? That night, long after the press stopped calling, Elena found Adrian standing on the balcony of his penthouse. The city lights reflected in his glass of whiskey. His posture was composed, but his eyes carried years of unspoken pain. "You've been quiet all evening," she said softly. He didn't turn around. "You handled yourself well today." "I wasn't sure I could." "You didn't just handle it, Elena. You owned it." He paused. "But the world doesn't let women like you shine without trying to dim you again. You need to be ready for what comes next." She joined him at the railing. "I've survived worse." "Yes," he said, glancing at her, "and that's exactly why I helped you." She frowned. "You've never told me why. You said my father saved your life, but you never explained how." For the first time, his composure cracked. He exhaled, eyes fixed on the skyline. 20 years ago, I was young, reckless, building my first company. A deal went wrong. Very wrong. Some powerful men wanted me gone. Your father, James Moore, found out and intervened. He used his connections to pull me out before they could destroy me. He told me I'd owe him one day. Elena's heart tightened. "And you repaid that debt when you saved me." Adrian shook his head. "That night at the train station, when I saw you, I didn't know who you were. I just saw a woman broken in ways I recognized. The next day, when I learned your name, I knew the promise I'd made years ago had found me again." Elena turned toward him, her voice barely a whisper. "You didn't just save me, you built me back up." He met her gaze, his expression softening. "No, you built yourself. I just made sure no one stood in your way." Silence settled between them, heavy but comfortable. The night air was cool, brushing against her skin like a memory. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" she asked. "Because I didn't want you to see me as your savior," he said quietly. "I wanted you to see me as your equal." Her breath caught. "And what if I do?" He smiled faintly, the kind that carried more sorrow than joy. "Then I'd be tempted to want more than that." For a long moment, neither spoke. The tension between them felt fragile, sacred. But Elena looked away first, her voice steady. "You've done enough for me, Adrian. It's time I start fighting my own battles." "You already are," he said gently. "But remember this, power isn't just about winning, it's about deciding what's worth losing." Later, as she returned home to Liam sleeping peacefully, Adrian's words echoed in her mind. For 7 years, she had been running from pain, from love, from the ghosts of her past. But now, she realized something profound. She didn't owe Eric revenge or the world explanations. She owed herself peace, and maybe, just maybe, she owed her heart a chance to feel again. She stood by her son's bedside, brushing his hair back tenderly. "We're almost there, my love," she whispered, "almost free." Outside, the wind carried faint music from the city below, and somewhere across the skyline, Adrian Blake looked up at the same stars, knowing that for the first time in years, his purpose had a name. For weeks after the DNA revelation, Eric Turner's world unraveled piece by piece. The press shredded his reputation, investors withdrew their funding, and Vanessa's public meltdown at a charity event became a viral meme. Turner Global, once the symbol of ambition and success, was now collapsing under the weight of scandal. And in the center of it all stood the man who had thought himself untouchable. He spent his days barricaded inside his penthouse, staring at unopened emails, ignored calls, and unpaid invoices. His reflection in the mirror was a stranger. Hollow eyes, unshaven jaw, a man haunted by choices he couldn't undo. Every night he replayed the same memories. Elena's trembling hands signing the divorce papers, her tearful face reflected in the courthouse glass, the cruel words he'd thrown at her like knives. And now her son, their son, had his smile, his mannerisms, his spirit. One evening, after too much whiskey and too little sleep, Eric made a decision. He needed to see them. Not for redemption, he didn't believe he deserved that, but because the silence was unbearable. The next morning, he drove to Moore Global's Manhattan office. He wasn't invited, wasn't expected, but that had never stopped him before. The receptionist froze when she saw him. "Mr. Turner, Miss Moore isn't taking meetings today." "She'll see me," he said, forcing a calm he didn't feel. "Tell her it's about Liam." Minutes later, Elena appeared in the doorway of her office, composed but wary. "What do you want, Eric?" He swallowed hard. "Just 5 minutes, please." She hesitated, then nodded curtly. "Fine. 5. Inside, the tension was palpable. The last time they'd spoken privately, he had been the one with all the power. Now every inch of the room belonged to her. "You've built something incredible," he said softly, his voice unsteady. "You did what I couldn't." "I did what you wouldn't," she replied. "I rebuilt after you destroyed." He nodded, shame flickering in his eyes. "I deserve that, I know." He took a step closer. "I saw him, Elena, at the gala. Liam, he looks just like—" "Don't," she interrupted. "Don't say his name like you've earned the right." Eric's voice cracked. "I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just want to see my son. Once. I just need to look him in the eyes." Elena stared at him for a long moment. Then, quietly, she said, "Fine, tomorrow, my home, but you come alone." The next day, Eric stood on the doorstep of her brownstone, heart pounding. When the door opened, Liam was there, bright-eyed, curious. "Hi," the boy said, tilting his head. "Are you Mommy's friend?" Eric's throat tightened. "Something like that." Inside, Elena watched silently as the two faced each other. For a brief moment, something human softened in Eric's eyes, a flicker of the man he once was. When Liam ran off to play, Eric turned to her. "He's perfect," he whispered. "Thank you for giving him a better life than I ever could." Elena's tone was gentle but firm. "You don't get to thank me, Eric. You get to live with what you did. You'll never be his father. But if you really want to be in his life, start by not making him pay for your sins." He nodded, tears threatening. "I'll do whatever you ask." She stepped closer, her gaze steady. "Then disappear, Eric. For his sake, let him grow up without knowing the man who broke his mother." He wanted to argue, to beg, but her words left no room for mercy. When he walked away from her home, the evening sky turned gray with rain, just like the day he'd lost her. And for the first time in his life, Eric Turner truly understood what it meant to be powerless. The fallout from the scandal didn't just wound Eric Turner's pride, it bled his empire dry. Within months, Turner Global's stock plummeted. Major investors abandoned ship and whispers began spreading through the financial world. The king had fallen. Eric's arrogance, once mistaken for brilliance, was now seen for what it was: reckless pride built on borrowed time. But what he didn't know was that the final blow was coming from the one woman he'd once underestimated the most. Elena sat in her office at Moore Global, the city's skyline glittering behind her like a promise fulfilled. Her phone buzzed with a message from Adrian. "The acquisition is ready. All we need is your signature." She exhaled slowly. The deal had been in the works for months, a quiet buyout through Blake Development subsidiaries. Piece by piece, they had purchased controlling shares of Turner Global. Eric had been too distracted by the chaos to notice. And now, the company that had once symbolized his triumph was hanging by a single thread, one that Elena held between her fingers. When Adrian entered the room, he found her staring out the window, deep in thought. "It's poetic, isn't it?" he said softly. "You could own everything he built." Elena didn't turn around. "It's not about owning it. It's about ending it." Adrian studied her face. "You don't have to do this for revenge." She met his gaze, calm but resolute. "I'm not. I'm doing it for closure." He nodded slowly. "Then let's finish it." Later that evening, the deal was finalized. The contracts were signed, the lawyers dismissed, and in less than an hour, the legacy of Turner Global passed into new hands, hers. The next morning, Eric was summoned to a shareholders' emergency meeting. He arrived exhausted, his suit wrinkled, his confidence long gone. When he entered the boardroom, the sight that greeted him made his stomach drop. Elena sat at the head of the table, Adrian beside her, the entire board silent. "What is this?" he demanded. Adrian folded his hands. "Effective immediately, Blake Developments and its affiliate More Global have acquired a majority stake in Turner Global." Eric's voice broke. "You can't," Elena interrupted softly. "Actually, we can, and we did." The color drained from his face. He turned to her, disbelief clouding his expression. "You planned this all this time?" She stood, every inch the woman he had once underestimated. "No, Eric. You planned your own destruction when you built your empire on deceit. I just happened to be the one standing when it crumbled." He took a shaky breath. "Please, don't do this. Don't take everything from me." Her voice was steady. "I'm not taking anything. I'm simply reclaiming what you threw away." For a moment, no one spoke. The weight of 7 years pressed down on both of them. Every lie, every betrayal, every tear she had ever shed. Finally, she gathered her papers and turned to leave. "You once told me that love doesn't pay bills," she said quietly. "Turns out, karma does." Eric slumped into his chair, defeated. The board members avoided his gaze, already moving on to congratulate their new leadership. Outside the building, rain began to fall again, washing the city in silver light. Elena stood beneath the awning, inhaling deeply. For the first time, the rain didn't sting. It felt like release. Adrian joined her, umbrella in hand. "It's done," he said. "Yes," she whispered. "It's finally done." As they walked away, the Turner Global logo shimmered faintly in the distance, soon to be replaced by new letters, More Blake Enterprises. The empire he built to prove his worth had become the monument to her strength. And for Elena Moore, vengeance had never tasted this quiet or this complete. New York had never been kind to fallen kings. By winter, Eric Turner had become a ghost of his former self. His name whispered only in boardrooms as a cautionary tale. Turner Global was gone, absorbed by More Blake Enterprises, its logo dismantled piece by piece. His penthouse, once filled with the trappings of wealth and ego, now echoed with silence and unpaid bills. The world he had built on arrogance had finally caved in on itself. On the front page of the Wall Street Journal, the headline was merciless: "Turner Empire officially dissolved, new era under More Blake." Beneath it, a photo of Elena, radiant and composed, standing beside Adrian, both smiling as they shook hands with city officials. Eric stared at the image until his vision blurred. He barely recognized the woman he'd once known. Vanessa had left weeks ago, taking what remained of his savings and filing for divorce in spectacular fashion. She sold her side of the story to a gossip magazine, painting herself as another of his victims. Eric Turner, the man who destroyed everything he touched, the cover screamed. For once the tabloids weren't exaggerating. He tried calling Elena once, but her assistant intercepted the call. "Miss Moore is unavailable," the voice said, professional and final. He didn't try again. Deep down, he knew she wouldn't answer, not out of cruelty, but because she had already forgiven him in the most painful way possible. By moving on, days blurred together. He stopped shaving, stopped attending meetings that no longer mattered. He wandered through the city aimlessly, passing billboards for the Manhattan Skyline project, the one he dreamed of controlling, now proudly labeled a More Blake vision. Each one was a reminder of how completely he'd lost. One evening, he found himself outside the very courthouse where Elena had signed their divorce papers years before. The steps glistened with rain, just as they had that night. He stood there for a long time, the cold cutting through his coat, the city rushing past him like time itself. A voice interrupted his thoughts. "Mr. Turner?" He turned. A young journalist stood there, notebook in hand. "I'm writing a piece on Moore Blake's acquisition," she said carefully. "People are calling it poetic justice. Do you have any comment?" Eric gave a hollow laugh. "Justice? No, it's survival. She did what I couldn't." "Do you regret it?" the reporter asked. He looked up at the courthouse, remembering the woman he'd once made cry inside its walls. "Every day," he whispered. She nodded, scribbling down his words. "Thank you, Mr. Turner." After she left, he walked to the park across the street, sitting on a bench beneath a flickering lamppost. His reflection shimmered in a puddle at his feet, tired, broken, forgotten. Somewhere nearby, a mother laughed with her son, the sound slicing through him like glass. He closed his eyes and saw Liam's face, the eyes that mirrored his own, the smile he'd never earned. For the first time, the tears came freely, not for the money or the empire or even for Elena, but for the man he could have been if he'd chosen love over pride. Meanwhile, across town, Elena stood on the rooftop of her new headquarters, watching the city lights flicker below. Adrian joined her, handing her a glass of champagne. "It's over," he said. She smiled faintly. "No, Adrian, it's just beginning." Below them, workers replaced the final piece of signage on the building. The letters gleamed under the city lights. Moore Blake Enterprises. At that exact moment, miles away, Eric stood up from the park bench and looked at the skyline, the same skyline she had once dreamed of building. For the first time he smiled, faintly but sincerely. "She did it," he murmured to himself. And as the wind swept through the city, it felt like both an ending and a long overdue peace. Spring returned to New York with soft rain and the scent of magnolias. The city that had once been a battlefield now felt like something gentler, almost forgiving. Elena stood on the balcony of her new penthouse, the morning sun spilling across the skyline she had helped design. It was quiet, peaceful, proof that the storms of the past had finally passed. Down the hall, laughter echoed. Liam was running after his golden retriever, his joy unrestrained. He was 6 now, all energy and curiosity, the living symbol of a future unburdened by bitterness. Watching him play always reminded Elena of what truly mattered. Not the victories, not the headlines, but the love that had survived everything. For months after the acquisition, she had thrown herself into work, determined to finish the Manhattan Skyline project. But lately, something inside her had begun to shift. She no longer woke each morning with the heavy armor of survival. Instead, she felt lighter, like someone who had finally learned how to breathe again. Adrian noticed it too. "You're smiling more these days," he said one afternoon during a site visit. "Maybe I'm just tired of fighting," she replied with a small laugh. He studied her for a moment, the wind tugging at his tie. "No," he said softly. "You've simply learned that peace can be louder than revenge." His words stayed with her long after he walked away. For so long she had equated strength with defiance, survival with victory. But maybe true strength was quieter, found in forgiveness, in the ability to rebuild not just buildings, but hearts. That evening, she took Liam to the pier. They sat on a wooden bench, watching the boats drift across the Hudson. "Mom," he asked suddenly, "why don't I have a dad like other kids?" Elena's heart clenched, but her voice remained calm. "You have someone better," she said gently. "You have people who love you more than anything." He thought for a moment, then smiled. "Like Uncle Adrian?" she chuckled softly. "Yes, sweetheart, like Uncle Adrian." Later that night, after putting Liam to bed, Elena sat by the window with a cup of tea. The city shimmered below, alive and endless. She thought of Eric, where he might be, what he might be doing. She didn't hate him anymore. The anger had burned itself out, leaving only the faint ache of what once was. Maybe that was forgiveness. Not forgetting, but releasing. A soft knock pulled her from her thoughts. When she opened the door, Adrian was there, holding a small bouquet of white tulips. "You left these at the office," he said, smiling. "I don't remember ordering flowers," she said. "You didn't?" "I did." She blinked, surprised. "Why?" He hesitated before answering. "Because today marks 7 years since you started over. You deserve to celebrate that." Her eyes softened. "Adrian, I know," he said gently. "You're still healing. I just wanted you to know, you don't have to do it alone anymore." For a moment, the silence between them felt sacred. She stepped aside, letting him in. They sat together on the couch, no words, just shared quiet. Outside, the rain began to fall again, gentle, cleansing. Elena leaned her head against his shoulder. "You've been my anchor, Adrian, every step of the way. And you've been my reason to stay," he murmured. They didn't kiss, not yet. It wasn't the time for grand gestures or declarations. It was enough to know that the wounds had finally healed enough to let light in. As the city lights shimmered below, Elena closed her eyes and whispered, "We made it." And for the first time in years, she truly believed it. 7 years after she had walked out of a courthouse in tears, Elena Moore stood before the completed Manhattan skyline, the tallest, most breathtaking building in New York. The glass shimmered like liquid gold under the morning sun, a monument not to power but to rebirth. The opening ceremony was moments away. Cameras were already waiting, journalists eager to capture the woman who had risen from ruin to redefine an entire city. Elena adjusted her white suit jacket, calm but emotional. Beside her stood Adrian Blake, composed as always, though there was a warmth in his eyes that only she could read. And just a few steps away, Liam tugged at her hand, looking up at the towering structure with wonder. "Mom," he whispered, "you built that?" She smiled softly. "We built it, sweetheart. Every part of it came from something we survived." The ribbon-cutting ceremony began. Applause filled the air as she approached the podium, the city skyline stretching endlessly behind her. Reporters leaned forward, pens ready. She took a breath. 7 years ago, she began, "I stood in this city with nothing. No home, no name, no hope. I was told I wasn't enough. But life has a way of rebuilding you when you refuse to give up. This building isn't just steel and glass, it's proof that second chances are real. That broken things can be rebuilt stronger than before." Her voice trembled, but she didn't falter. "To every woman who's ever been told she can't, to every person who's ever been left behind, remember, you don't need revenge, you need resilience. Because the best revenge is peace, and the loudest victory is silence." The crowd erupted into applause. Cameras flashed, but Elena's eyes found only one face in the distance, Eric Turner's. He stood quietly at the back, no cameras, no entourage, just a man watching the life he once shattered take shape without him. After the ceremony, he approached slowly, hesitant. "It's beautiful," he said softly. "So is what we had," she replied, her tone gentle but firm. He nodded. "I deserved everything that happened. I just wanted to say, thank you for raising him right." Elena studied him for a moment. The arrogance was gone. What stood before her was not the man who once broke her, but the man who had finally learned humility through loss. "You should thank yourself too," she said. "Without your betrayal, I might never have found who I was meant to be." He exhaled shakily. "I hope someday he knows the truth." "He will," she said, "but not as a tragedy, as a lesson." They parted without bitterness, just the quiet understanding that some stories weren't meant to end in love, but in closure. Later that evening, Elena, Adrian, and Liam returned to the building one last time. The sun was setting, casting golden light across the city. On the top floor, a marble plaque had been installed. It read, "Moore Blake Foundation, for those who refuse to stay broken." Elena traced the letters with her fingertips. "Do you think people will understand what it means?" she asked. Adrian smiled. "They don't have to. They'll feel it." Liam ran to the glass wall, pointing at the city below. "Mom, look. The lights are turning on. It's like stars on the ground." Elena wrapped an arm around her son, her other hand slipping into Adrian's. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "It's exactly how I imagined it." Adrian leaned closer. "You did it, Elena. You turned every wound into wonder." She looked out at the skyline, the same skyline that once represented pain, and felt nothing but peace. The woman who had once signed divorce papers in tears had rebuilt her life, her name, and her legacy. And this time she wasn't just standing in the light. So that's how our story comes to an end. And if you're still here, my dear friend, it means something inside this story touched you. Maybe softly, maybe deeply. But it did. Elena's journey isn't just about revenge or success. It's about healing, about rising again when the world thinks you're finished. Life will break you, but as the Stoics remind us, what stands in the way becomes the way. Every wound, every betrayal, every tear can be the foundation of something stronger. If you choose to rebuild. Elena didn't win because she fought harder. She won because she learned peace was more powerful than pride. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. Marcus Aurelius once said, "Maybe right now you're going through your own version of Elena's storm. And if you are, I want you to remember this. You are not broken. You are becoming." If this story moved you, if it reminded you that strength can come quietly and healing is never too late, please give this video a like, share it with someone who needs hope tonight, and don't forget to subscribe. Because sometimes, a story is exactly what our hearts need to start again.